A border can feel like a mistake, but in the Dutch town of Barle, the mistake is everyday life. Barle sits in the southern Netherlands close to Belgium, but it is not simply Dutch. Scattered through the town are small pieces of Belgium, and inside some of those Belgian pieces are even smaller pieces of the Netherlands. The result is one of the most tangled border arrangements in Europe. The strange part is not just that the border twists around streets. It can run between neighboring houses. It can separate one shop from the next. In a few cases, a building may sit across both countries, which means its official address can depend on where the main entrance is. This did not happen because someone drew a careless modern line. It grew out of medieval land ownership. Centuries ago, local lords controlled different farms, fields, and rights in the same area. Over time, those old property arrangements hardened into national borders. When Belgium became independent in the 19th century, the patchwork survived instead of being smoothed away. What makes Barle fascinating is that it is not abandoned, frozen, or symbolic only. People live with it. There are two local governments, two sets of services, and a constant need for cooperation. A resident might cross an international border during an ordinary walk to buy bread. A business might deal with rules from one country while serving customers from both, and yet Barle works because it has to. Instead of erasing the old lines, residents and officials learn to manage them with patience, records, and habit. The town has become a quiet lesson in how geography is not always clean. Borders are often imagined as simple lines, but here they behave more like history trapped in the streets. Barle raises the first question. If a border can divide a town this deeply, what happens when it cuts off an entire community? Point Roberts is not an island, but for many practical purposes it behaves like one. It sits at the southern tip of a peninsula on the Pacific coast of North America. Politically, it belongs to Washington State in the United States. Geographically, its only land connection is with British Columbia, Canada. To drive from Point Roberts to the rest of Washington, residents usually have to leave the United States, enter Canada, cross a stretch of Canadian territory, and then enter the United States again. The reason is simple and strangely blunt. In the 19th century, Britain and the United States agreed that much of the boundary in the region would follow the 49th parallel. That line was easy to define in treaty language, but it sliced across the base of the peninsula, leaving the small southern tip on the American side, separated by land from the rest of the country. Point Roberts became what geographers call an exclave, a piece of territory attached politically to one country, but practically reached through another. It has homes, roads, businesses, beaches, and a local identity shaped by that odd position. The consequences are not theoretical. Everyday errands can involve international border crossings, deliveries, school routes, medical appointments, and family visits. All require more planning than they would in an ordinary town, when border movement becomes slower or more restricted. Point Roberts feels it immediately, because access is not just convenient there, it is essential. And yet the community endures, because unusual geography creates its own routines. People learn the crossings, services adapt. The place becomes both American and deeply connected to nearby Canada, not by politics, but by practical life. Point Roberts proves that a straight border can create a crooked reality. Barle was tangled by old land rights. Point Roberts was isolated by a clean line drawn across a peninsula. And the next border oddity is stranger still, because it runs through a building made for people on both sides. Some borders divide towns by accident. In Darby Line, Vermont, and Stansted, Quebec, one border became part of a building's purpose. The two communities sit side by side on the United States-Canada boundary. For generations, local life flowed across that line through family ties, shopping work, and conversation. Then, in the early 20th century, a family with connections to both sides helped create the Haskell Free Library and Opera House as a shared civic space. The building is famous because the international border passes through it, not near it. Through it, The entrance is on the American side, while parts of the library and opera house extend into Canada. The opera house is especially unusual. The stage is commonly described as being in Canada, while many seats are in the United States. That detail sounds like a novelty, but it carries a deeper meaning. The building was not designed to make the border disappear. It was designed to let neighbors meet despite it. A person could attend a performance read or gather in a place where the boundary was present, but not the main point. Today, the border is more formal than it once was. Crossing rules matter. Security matters. The library has had to operate carefully within that reality, but its purpose still feels rare. One public institution serving two communities, two countries, and one shared local history. The most surprising part is that this oddity is not a remote wilderness line or an empty legal quirk. It sits inside ordinary civic life. A border that usually separates nations became part of a place built around books, performance, memory, and trust. Barle shows a border tangled by medieval property. Point Roberts shows a town isolated by a straight treaty line. Haskell shows something quieter, a border carried indoors, where geography becomes a daily act of cooperation.